The people who have lived on Easter Island for centuries call it by the name Tepito Ote Henua, which translates literally to the center of the world. Other names for it are translated as the land's end or fragment of the earth. And today's Polynesians call the island Rapa Nui.
In July of 2020, the research journal Nature published a DNA study that linked the indigenous inhabitants of the remote South Pacific island of Rapa Nui with the indigenous people's DNA of Colombia, South America. To explain this connection, researchers linked the genetics as follows. Quote, "Our analysis suggests strongly that a single contact event occurred in eastern Polynesia before the settlement of Rapa Nui between Polynesian individuals and a Native American group most closely related to the indigenous inhabitants of present-day Colombia." The argument is that people from way over here in northern South America, one time in great antiquity, traveled all the way over here to a tiny island somewhere in the middle of the Pacific and got jiggy with the indiggy. I'm going to suggest a different thesis. This island, called Fragment of the Earth by the locals, is just that, a once-connected fragment of the continent of South America prior to the cataclysm. The Columbian genetic line of the Island of Rapa Nui represents a people separated in the cataclysm 12,900 years ago, much like the native North Americans and Inuit of Asia, and it would appear they survived by floating on a fragment of the earth to the land's end. Click that like and subscribe button, and welcome to Cataclysm 19, Rapa Nui, the fragment of the earth.
Easter Island is at the eastern corner of an area we call the Polynesian Triangle, a vast region of the Pacific Ocean broken by over 1,000 volcanic islands.
In Cataclysm 13, we looked at the theory of crustal expansion creating the Ring of Fire in the Pacific Ocean. At a point of extreme pressure on the Earth's magnetic field and thus crust, the crust of the Earth split completely along the west coast of the Americas. The pressure of Venus literally broke the crust and pushed the continent of Asia west in the northern hemisphere near impact, and pushed the crust south, sending Antarctica to the bottom of the world in the southern hemisphere. In the middle, Rapa Nui is called the center of the world by the indigenous people because it was the literal center of the Earth break, first breaking off from South America and then breaking away from Antarctica as the crust split in two directions. Let's look at why Rapa Nui ended up being dragged to the middle of the Pacific and what pretty much all of the islands of the triangle represent. Geography and geology tell us everything we need to know. In Cataclysm 17, we explored the theory that the Aleutian Islands represented the remnants of the electromagnetic cords of the Earth's shield becoming hypercharged, forming the dome volcano structures of the chain. We saw the same thing in the formation of the Cook and Lesser Antilles Islands in Cataclysm 18. The domes and volcanoes were formed by these magnetic cords coming out of the Earth's surface. These aren't ancient volcanoes, so much as the remnants of the Earth attempting to repel Venus and deal with the electromagnetic pressures that it created. Rapa Nui has three such main structures researchers have called dormant volcanoes. These are not dormant volcanoes. These were three primary magnetic cords, electrically positioned, expressing a delta-Y transformer, explaining the triangular formation of the island. According to researchers, there are more than 70 minor domes which dot Rapa Nui, indicating that the entire area became a field line hotspot. When the crust eventually cracked, this little sliver cracked off from both South America and Antarctica, and was quite literally dragged south and then west by the cords of the Earth's magnetic shield as the Pacific plates formed. This is why we can follow the underwater ridge and get a pretty decent idea of where the island of Rapa Nui originated. This little fragment of the island here is called Poiki, which is a unique indigenous word to the island of Rapa Nui, not shared by other Polynesian tribes, and it rests just outside the triangle. It's my guess that if there were any survivors on the island as it traveled across the expanding Earth, they survived here, sheltered like a baby in a crib. I base this on the clear sedimentary rock deposits visible on its coast and on the top coat of clay that remains visible today. This wet clay likely insulated any people above from what was going on below. Let's talk about what was going on below. In the book Easter Island, Earth Island, The Enigma of Rapa Nui, we find an interesting entry on pollen sample research conducted on the easternmost crater of the island, Rano Raraku. Quote, immediately below the layer of in-wash sediment at 3 feet 7 to 3 feet 11 in depth, there was a striking change in the pollen spectra. Grass pollen was less common, and the grass grains were much larger. Prior to the cataclysm, the grass grains weren't just larger, they were much larger. They were also fossilized, by the way, or turned to rock. This is an indicator the mass of the Earth changed. In an expanded Earth model, an increase in the mass of the Earth forces all living matter to become smaller and more efficient. The report continues, quote, but the big change was the sudden appearance of palm pollen as the dominant type, indicating, of course, that after this point, living palm trees suddenly disappeared. Researchers stretch to explain the extinction of the giant palm, but principally argue that the inhabitants cut them all down to move the statues. They didn't cut the trees down, and the statues were not moved on rollers. I will get to the moai in my follow-up video, Disclosure 20, the moai machines. Remarkably, the holes created by the roots in the ground are very recognizable to experts due to their similarity to the Chilean wine palm. For some reason, a large number of the root holes of these extinct giant palm are found embedded in incredibly hard basalt rock, and the root holes are filled with carbon, or ashes in a more layman's term. To put a fine tip on the researchers' findings, the holes the palm tree roots bored into the basalt rock were not along cracks and crevices. They left holes 15 to 20 centimeters in diameter and, like a palm tree, each had multiple root lines that seemed to have moved through the basalt rock like a hot knife in butter, up to 6 meters. These were some extraordinary palm trees. The clay, which the giant palm trees rooted in originally, was metamorphosed during the cataclysm into basalt, with extreme heat burning the organic matter, leaving the root cavity mold and a carbon residue. For more evidence of an electrical event metamorphosing matter, here's a palm nut found on the island in a cave purported to be a lava tube. It had been eaten around the edges by a rodent before not decaying, not even in the slightest, but being turned to stone. It is another example of instant electrical fossilization and proof of an extreme electrical event in the island's remote past. Rapa Nui was the leading edge of a triangular array of the Earth's magnetic shield repelling Venus. The Polynesian triangle itself is also a delta Y transformer, a triangular electrical configuration of the magnetic cords. Thousands of islands and atolls, thousands of cords of the Earth's magnetic field, piercing the crust and leaving the remnant crater and islands behind as the Earth repelled Venus. The companion video to this one, Disclosure 20, the moai machines, will blow your mind. Like, share, subscribe, leave me a comment down below. Peace.